She thought it would be another routine flight, smiling at passengers, guiding them safely, and carrying the quiet pride of being a black woman in uniform. But within moments, her dignity was shattered. A passenger, filled with arrogance, decided she didn't belong there, barking a command so degrading you left the cabin in stunned silence. The humiliation cut deep. But what happened next would shake the entire airline industry. How could one act of cruelty spark a chain of events powerful enough to bring flights to a halt?
Her name was Danielle, a seasoned flight attendant who had worked tirelessly to earn her place in the skies. For years, she carried herself with quiet confidence, her polished uniform and warm smile a reflection of the pride she felt in her work. To her, each flight wasn't just a job, it was a chance to connect with people from all walks of life, to ensure safety and bring calm even in turbulence. Passengers often admired her kindness, the way she treated everyone with patience, whether it was a nervous flyer clutching an armrest or a child asking endless questions. Colleagues respected her too, often turning to her when challenges arose mid-flight. She was steady, dependable, and professional, qualities that made her not just good at her job, but beloved in it. But beneath the calm surface of routine, tension lingered in places she couldn't control. In an industry where appearances mattered, she knew her presence as a black woman in uniform carried weight, sometimes celebrated, other times judged harshly. She had grown used to subtle stares, whispered comments, and the occasional dismissive tone. Still, nothing could have prepared her for the open humiliation waiting just ahead, one that would test not only her resilience, but the system around her.
The flight began like any other. Passengers settling in, trays clicking into place, engines roaring as the aircraft lifted into the sky. Danielle moved smoothly through the aisle, her professional rhythm so natural it looked effortless. She offered water, adjusted luggage, and reassured those nervous about flying. But the moment of calm didn't last. Halfway through the journey, a passenger in the middle rows began to shift impatiently. He was a sharply dressed man in his 40s, tapping his foot against the floor with growing irritation. Danielle approached, ready to offer assistance, but his eyes locked on her with a glare that pierced through the hum of the cabin. His words, sharp and cold, cut through the air. He demanded she clean up a small spill beneath his seat, as if her role, her uniform, and her dignity meant nothing more than servitude. The surrounding passengers fell into silence. Some lowered their eyes, unwilling to be involved. Others watched closely, sensing the cruelty in his tone. Danielle froze for a heartbeat, the sting of humiliation spreading across her chest. She was trained to handle difficult passengers, but this wasn't about spilled water. It was about race. It was about being reduced to something less than human in front of a crowd. Her colleagues exchanged uncertain glances, torn between intervening and keeping the peace. Danielle, holding back her anger, knelt briefly to address the mess with steady hands. Yet every motion felt like a public stripping of her worth. The man leaned back smugly, as if victorious, while whispers began to ripple across the cabin. But Danielle's silence was not submission, it was calculation. She knew acting rashly could cost her job. Still, she also knew this incident couldn't simply fade into the background. The injustice burned too deeply. As the plane neared its destination, her mind raced. Should she let this go and carry the wound alone, or fight back against a system that too often turned its head? Passengers avoided her eyes as she passed, but a few offered sympathetic nods, their silent acknowledgement of what they had witnessed. The humiliation was undeniable. The question was no longer if Danielle would act, it was when and how. As the plane touched down and the passengers prepared to disembark, Danielle's heart pounded,
not from fear, but from resolve. The humiliation replayed in her mind like a cruel echo, but she refused to let it end there. She gathered every ounce of courage she had stored away from years of enduring quiet slights, subtle exclusions, and whispered mockery. This moment would not be buried. When the seatbelt sign switched off, Danielle rose with purpose. Instead of retreating to the galley as expected, she stood tall in the aisle. Her voice, calm but unshakable, carried over the murmur of restless passengers. She recounted what had happened, every word exposing the ugliness that had unfolded just hours before. The silence that followed was deafening. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, some lowering their heads, others nodding in support. The man responsible smirked, dismissing her courage as nothing more than theatrics. But this time, Danielle didn't bow to silence. She documented the incident, alerting her supervisors the moment the cabin doors opened. The airport terminal became her stage, the truth pouring out as colleagues, officials, and eventually the media began to gather. For once, the weight of injustice was not hers to carry alone. What began as a private humiliation had now become a public reckoning. The man's arrogance faltered under the light of exposure, his smirk vanishing as witnesses confirmed her words. Danielle had taken the moment meant to strip her dignity and turned it into her weapon. Yet what came next would ripple far beyond one passenger or one flight. Because when one woman refused to be silent, the entire airline was forced to listen.
The aftermath was swift and undeniable. The passenger who once sneered with arrogance now faced disciplinary action and a permanent ban from the airline. Danielle's report, backed by witnesses, spread quickly within the company. What could have been another ignored complaint became a headline because she refused to stay silent. For Danielle, the victory was not about revenge, but about reclaiming her dignity. She had carried the weight of humiliation for only a few hours, but her response transformed that pain into strength. Standing in the terminal, surrounded by strangers who had once been silent, she saw something shift: acknowledgement. At last, the truth was not hidden in whispers, but spoken aloud for all to hear. Yet, the story was bigger than Danielle. It spoke to the countless moments of racism that never make the news, the slights endured in silence, the careers stunted, and the dignity stolen. Her courage was a reminder that racism does not only wound in private, it festers when allowed to pass unchallenged. By speaking up, she forced a powerful institution to listen, and in doing so, she became a voice for many who could not. Airplanes would fly again, passengers would move on, but the impact of that day lingered. Danielle had shown that even in the face of humiliation, one person's stand can ground an entire system, if only for a moment. And so the question remains, when injustice confronts us in our own lives, will we stay silent in our seats, or will we stand, as Danielle did, and demand to be heard?